Ishmael. Ishmael gets away, and so when Johanan has rescued everybody that Ishmael was taking back to Baalis, they go down and they camp down by Bethlehem, and they're at a crossroads. And we looked at chapter 42 where they came to Jeremiah and they asked Jeremiah what? Or stay. They ask him, they say, take our petition to the Lord. Ask him what we should do. And we swear, we promise that we will do whatsoever the Lord commands us, whether it be good or evil in our sight. We will do what he tells us to do, and we will go where he tells us to go. Right? So what does God tell them to do? Tells them to stay. And they wanted to go. Okay? So they want to go down to Egypt. That was their plan. But they stop and they ask Jeremiah, Jeremiah, you ask God what we should do, and we promise we will do it. Okay? And last week we looked at, as Jeremiah is closing, as he's finishing, tell them that God's telling them, if you go to Egypt, the things you're running away from will follow you to Egypt. But if you stay, my blessing and my protection will be upon you. So stay. When Jeremiah is getting to the closing, he's looking at them, and he knows that they don't like what he's told them. He can see it on their faces. And he pleads with them not to go down into Egypt. He sees it on their faces that they don't like it and that they are going to go to Egypt. And so he warns them. He comes out before he's even done. He knows that they were not going to obey. Okay? So let's go ahead and turn to Jeremiah and chapter 43. And let's look at chapter 43. We're going to look at verses 1 down through verse 7 this morning. And the Bible says, and it came to pass that when Jeremiah had made an end of speaking unto all the people all the words of the Lord their God, for which the Lord their God had sent him to them, even all these words, then spake Azariah, the son of Hoshaiah, and Johanan, the son of Kareah, and all the men, and all the proud men, saying unto Jeremiah, thou speakest falsely. The Lord our God hath not sent thee to say, go not into Egypt to sojourn there. Now wait a minute. They asked Jeremiah, you as the prophet of God, you ask your God. And Jeremiah says, I will ask your God. And they say, okay, ask our God what we should do. They recognized that Jeremiah was the prophet. Okay, but as soon as Jeremiah said something they didn't like, they said, God didn't send you. He didn't send you. He wouldn't tell us not to go down into Egypt. Okay? Verse 3, but Baruch the son of Neriah setteth thee on against us for to deliver us into the hand of the Chaldeans, that they might put us to death and carry us away captives into Babylon. So Johanan the son of Kareah and all the captains of the forces and all the people obeyed not the voice of the Lord to dwell in the land of Judah. But Johanan the son of Kareah and all the captains of the forces took all the remnant of Judah that were returned from all nations whither they had been driven to dwell in the land of Judah, even men and women and children and the king's daughters, and every person that Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, had left with Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, and Jeremiah the prophet, and Baruch, the son of Neriah. So they came into the land of Egypt, for they obeyed not the voice of the Lord. Thus came they even to Tahpanhes. Let's open in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. Lord, we thank you for everything you've done for us. Lord, I just thank you for everybody who's here. Lord, I just pray as we look at this chapter in Jeremiah, Lord, that you give me the words to say, and I pray that you would help us to learn the lesson you'd have us to learn. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So, immediately after Jeremiah gets done telling them what God wants of them, what do? They do the opposite. But what do they do to Jeremiah? Well, they take him along. They say he's lying. Yep. They're saying you're a liar. God didn't send you. God didn't tell you God didn't tell you to tell us not to go into Egypt. Okay? They immediately deny his authenticity, and they refuse to believe that God wanted them to stay in the land that they perceived as dangerous, and they marched on to Egypt. Okay, now that's a good point to remember through this whole thing. They perceived the land as dangerous. They thought it was dangerous. There's going to be trouble now. Ishmael killed Nebuchadnezzar's ambassadors, his symbols of authority. They killed his governor. And now Ishmael has gone back to Baalis. They didn't kill that enemy. So now they're faced between the anger of Nebuchadnezzar and the enemies in Ishmael and Baalis. And now they have all this land. They have to till all this land. When Babylon comes in, they scorch earth, everything. Everything gets burned. So there's no crops to be taken. They got to restart, and they got to plant. They might be facing a hard winter or out of season, out of harvest. And so it's going to be a little bit of trouble. And so they perceive this land as dangerous and unfit for them. And so they refuse to believe that God would want them there in the land of trouble, in the valley. And they say, no, we're going to go on to Egypt where there's going to be ease, where we'll be taken care of. And surely God wants us to be in Egypt where there's going to be peace. Okay? Matthew Henry writes, when men will persist in sin, they represent those that would turn them from it as designing men for themselves, nay, as ill-designing men against their neighbors. What does this mean? There's a bit of phrasing in here that's kind of hard to grasp. I know, because you got to read it a few times. Okay, I'll read it again. When men will persist in sin, okay, when men are determined to continue in sin, they represent those that would turn them from it, those who are warning them, as designing men for themselves, or as people that are just doing something for themselves, as ill-designing men against their neighbors. They paint them to be people who are all in it for themselves. Okay? That's what that means. Do we see that today? Or have you seen this said on social media? Has somebody said this to you? Okay? Do you recognize this? This is what, in today's world, or as I see it in our culture, in our day and age, is there are people who are determined to live in sin. And they don't even see it as sin. They're just determined to live the way that they want to live. And when they are warned against that sin, what do? Well, you're just hateful, or you're a bigot, or you're homophobic, or you're just you're judgmental, and you're just angry, and you're just wrathful, or you just want my money. People want you to go to church just for their money, or the church is full of hypocrites. Okay? They say these things because they're determined to remain in their sin, and so they have to tear down the character of those that would draw them away from their sin. And now there's answers to all of those. Is that no, we're not bigoted, we're not hateful. There are some, admittedly, in the church that are that way. I've talked to people before that have said, you know what, I used to go to this church, but they were just hateful, angry people. And shame on that church, because that's not how we should be. We should be loving, we should be accepting, we should be as Christ. We should not bridle when somebody comes through the door that we deem, or say we won't associate with that person because they're a sinner. But you know what? Christ ate and drank and conversed and sat with sinners, okay? But he changed them. That's the key. And so you might say, and I've heard this too, I know one example where this young man started smoking marijuana with his friends. And he said, well, Paul said, I am all things to all men. I'm just trying to reach my friends, and I got to smoke pot with them in order to do that. Well, no. You're conforming to them. Christ never conformed. He changed those that came to him. And he lived a life where those people wanted to come to him. Okay? They wanted to be changed. They wanted to live a different life. They wanted to have what Christ was offering. And that's when he sat at the well with the Samaritan woman. His disciples would not have done it. No Jew would have done that. Because they're Samaritans, they're half-breeds, they're wicked. But Christ sat with him. But what did he do? He spoke to her and he changed her. And he gave her the words of life and the waters, the living waters. And through him, she went, or through her, he reached all the people. She went back to the city and he drew people to Christ. So yes, spend time with with unsaved friends. Spend time with those people that as a Christian you might go, I don't, well. Or when somebody walks through the door unwashed, unchanged, or just like came right out of the field. Well, number one, it's not such a big deal here because of our society, our culture. I mean, that happens, right? In the summer, people are haying. They come in off the field. That's fine. We're not worried about it. But there's some cities, some churches, especially in some cities, where if you don't come in a suit and a tie, man, nobody wants to talk to you. And they just want to, they don't greet you. They turn around and they don't look at you. They don't shake your hand. And it's because you're not conforming to what they want to be represented in the church. Whereas that person came through them doors and he's actually seeking Christ, the Christians should reach out to them. And they should reach for them. And we ought not be those people that give other people the ground to stand on when they accuse us of being, as Matthew Henry says, designers for themselves. People that are just trying to reach other people for their own good or lift themselves up. Okay, that's a bit of a rabbit trail. I got to kill the rabbit and get off there. Okay? So they attack the character of the one preaching God's word and accuse him of doing it all for himself. Okay? And that's what they did to Jeremiah. They said, God did not send you. You're lying. Baruch sent you, and Baruch is planning on turning us over to the king of Babylon that he would kill us. Well, last week we talked about if they had stayed in Judah, and if Johanan had sent messages to the king to Nebuchadnezzar and said, Ishmael came, he killed your governor, I have fought against him, I have run him off, and we will sit here and wait for your new ambassador, and if you send men to us, we will go and we'll get Ishmael and we'll take care of him. Or maybe Nebuchadnezzar would come or would send ambassadors and say, because you fought against the one who killed my governor, here's an army, go kill Ishmael. It's very likely that they wouldn't have been punished by Nebuchadnezzar because they tried to deal with the one who wronged Nebuchadnezzar. So that fear is kind of out the window. But they were stuck on this fear that Nebuchadnezzar was going to come in and hurt them. And they were facing the legitimate fear that Ishmael might come back, this time with Baalis' army. And so that fear is genuine because, yeah, now they have two enemies, Ishmael and Baalis. But they shouldn't have to worry about Nebuchadnezzar. But that fear is there. Okay, so there's fear there. And so they tell Jeremiah, you're lying to us. God wouldn't tell you to tell us not to go into Egypt. These people had always harbored the desire to return to Egypt, as did their fathers. They weren't, 6 months out of Egypt before they started saying, we got to go back. We got to go back. There's onions and there's melons. We have to go back to Egypt. Okay, there was that desire in them. And if you look at the history, if you read through Kings and Chronicles, you see this desire to turn to Egypt for their strength, to go to Egypt for their strength, to go to Egypt for their protection. And David wrote in the Psalms, and I was going to put this in here and I completely forgot about it, but he says, we will not trust in horses and chariots, but we will trust in the strength of the Lord our God. That's paraphrase. I don't even remember which psalm it is, but that's the gist of what David said. David said, my reign, I'm not trusting in horses and chariots. I'm not trusting in Egypt. I'm not going to put because Egypt was known for their horses and their chariots. Solomon, when he built his stables, they said he brought the horses up out of Egypt. Horses and chariots, and he had a great stable, and he had all these men and all this vast host. But David said, we're going to trust in the Lord our God. I will trust in God for my strength. I'm not going to trust in Egypt. I'm not going to trust in the strength of men, but I'm going to trust in the strength of God. But these people had been harboring that desire to go back to Egypt. For 900 years, there was hidden in some the desire to return to the illusion of peace in the lands of Egypt. They had illusions of the peace that was in Egypt. Okay? What did God bring them out of when he brought them out of Egypt? Bondage. They completely forgot about the bondage, or they said, you know what? It doesn't matter the work that we had to do. The bondage doesn't matter. We had onions and melons. You know, it doesn't matter that we had to work out in the sun all day. It doesn't matter that they whipped us. It doesn't matter that they were cruel to us. It doesn't matter that they took our sons and slaughtered them. We had onions and melons. They had illusions of the peace of Egypt, and they forgot the price they were paying for that. Okay? And now in the face of angry Nebuchadnezzar and new enemies and Ishmael and Baalis, they thought nothing better than to be under the protection of Pharaoh. They said, man, if we just go to Pharaoh, we'll be okay. In Nebuchadnezzar's mind, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, in Nebuchadnezzar's mind, why was Nebuchadnezzar conquering Judah? Does anybody remember why we were talking about this? What was the point of conquering Judah? From a strategic, worldly point of view. Because we know that obviously God raised up Nebuchadnezzar to judge Jerusalem. Right? That's God orchestrated all that. But Nebuchadnezzar's whole plan was he had failed to conquer Egypt because he had to cross the wilderness, cross the desert. Okay? But in the beginning of Jeremiah, we read that the enemy will come from the north. Well, that's because Nebuchadnezzar, when he conquered, he went north. He stayed out of the wilderness, and he went through the populated areas, went through Syria, went through Turkey, went down through Damascus, conquered Damascus, had a stronghold in Damascus. And from Damascus, he was going to conquer Jerusalem so that he could stage his army in Judah and quickly march down into Egypt and conquer Egypt. It was strategic. Instead of marching all the way across and wearying his army down, he determined if we conquer Judah, we can camp right outside of the border of Egypt and go right into Egypt. And we'll have farms, we'll have slaves, we'll have everything we need to supply an army sitting right up there in Judah. And we'll just be able to go down in Egypt. Nebuchadnezzar's whole plan is to conquer Egypt. And where is the remnant going? Egypt. They're just being silly. They were trusting in Egypt's strength. Yes?
Israel was then strategic in that God had promised them to the land of honey. It was going to be prosperous. So it was a good strategic
It was a gold mine.
Jerusalem was
Yeah. Yeah, it was perfect for planting an army and supplying an army and marching down into Egypt. Okay? So that's the strategic point. And that's just to put in your minds, Nebuchadnezzar's whole plan is to conquer Egypt. And they think they're going to get away from Nebuchadnezzar by going into Egypt. Okay, so they're just not thinking through everything. Okay? Morgan writes, so they fain would render themselves safe from the oppression of Chaldea, or from Nebuchadnezzar, by bending their neck to Egypt. They would make themselves safe from Babylon by submitting to Egypt. Potential slavery to slavery again. Guaranteed. Okay? Notice that even though the people went down into Egypt, God sent Jeremiah down with them. God would not leave even this disobedient people without a witness. Okay? Because really, I don't think they really wanted Jeremiah to come with. It says that they took Jeremiah and Baruch with them. But I think that's more of they just, if you're going to come, you might, okay, fine, whatever. But God had a mission for Jeremiah, so he still had plans for Jeremiah, and for Jeremiah to go into Egypt with them, to continue to warn them, and perhaps to convince them in the way to turn around and come back. He rose up early to send Jeremiah, to make sure Jeremiah went with them, because he wasn't done with those people, even though they were disobedient against him. Jeremiah pleads with the people to stay in the land. God warned them of the Egyptian road and promised them blessing if they stayed. He warned them that if they go to Egypt, the things they're running from will follow them, and that Egypt will curse them, and that Egypt will hate them, and that Egypt will want them out of there because they'll bring trouble with them. But God tells them that if they stay, there will be blessing. He'll take care of them. He will watch over them. He said, obey that I might have mercy upon you, that Nebuchadnezzar will have mercy upon you. God promised them, if you stay, I will make sure that Nebuchadnezzar leaves you alone. That promise was there, but they disobeyed. They could not see how staying in Judah would help them. How is it that a people whose history is full of divine deliverance and accomplishments of mighty things not possible in their own strength are now but a remnant running in fear? That's long drawn out. Very stiff-necked people. Okay? Well, the answer is in verse 4. It says, Johanan, the son of Kareah, and all the captains of the forces and all the people obeyed not the voice of the Lord to dwell in the land of Judah. That's the answer. Why this nation that saw the ruin of Egypt, not the downfall, because Egypt remained, but ruin in Egypt, where a multitude is led out, numbered of over 1 million people, led out of Egypt, and mighty works done all through that, and to become a mighty people, to conquer the land that was promised them, to have a king whose wealth is known through the whole known world, and his wisdom is above all things, and people pay tribute to him, and kings pay tribute to him, and royalty from around the world come to see the temple that he built, and to see his wisdom and to see his influence. How is that nation that is so mighty, that did so many things not possible in their power, how did they fall down to such a point where they're but a remnant, numbered in the few thousands, if that? Some people gauge around 3,000 people are left. We read that there have been some people that have start coming back, so that number might have swelled, but this is just a minuscule number left. How is it that they have fallen so far from what God had set up for them? It's because they disobeyed. They turned away from God. They forgot his precepts. They forgot his commandments. They wandered away from God, and they went and they did their own thing. That's how they fell. Morgan says they had a failure of faith. He writes, failure of faith, issuing in degeneration of desire, and that finally issuing in such corruption of conscience that these men had lost that which is supreme, which is the supreme thing in the life of a nation or the life of a man, a conscience. When in this sense we speak of failure of faith, we are face to face with the constantly reoccurring fact that faith is more than intellectual apprehension. Okay, so what Morgan is saying, Morgan says that in their failure of faith, their desires degraded and their conscience was corrupted. And he says, in doing this, and when we speak of the failure of faith, we're faced with the fact that faith isn't just a conscience apprehension. Or how does it say it there? An intellectual apprehension. Faith isn't just knowing. Okay? So I'm going to ask this question. What is faith? If the Israelites, if these men of Judah had a failure of faith, what did they fail in? What is faith? Okay. In part. Trust. Okay. Okay, that's good, because I was going to go to Hebrews. So let's all turn over to Hebrews. That's all part of it. But there's something more to faith. Okay, there is something more to faith. So let's look at Hebrews in chapter 10, verse 23 to 25. It says, let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering. Okay, we're to hold fast to our faith. Okay, for he is faithful that promised. And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. Can you see a little bit of where I'm getting here on what is faith? Maybe? Okay, it's an action. Let's go on to chapter 11. Okay, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good report. Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of the things which do appear. Okay, the elders obtained a good report. Who are those elders? They're listed here. A few of them are listed here. Okay, so let's look at what they did. By faith, verse 4, by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous. Okay, verse 5, by faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation he had this testimony, what? That he pleased God. Enoch didn't die. God raptured Enoch. Okay, he translated him because he had a good report that he pleased God. Okay, but without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. By faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house. By faith Abraham, when he was called to go into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise. Okay, let's go down to verse 11. Through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past aged, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Okay. 17, by faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promise offered up his only begotten son. Okay. Verse 20, by faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph, and worshipped, leaning upon the top of his staff. By faith Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel, and gave commandment concerning his bones. These men, through faith, did these things because they're looking forward to the time when they will inherit the land, okay, when they will be a nation. Okay, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents' faith. Okay? By faith Moses, when he came to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Okay? Not DreamWorks version where he found out by accident. No, he knew, and he could have accepted that place of privilege, but he refused it. He refused to be called the son of Pharaoh because he knew who he was. Okay? Verse 29, by faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry ground, what the Egyptians saying to do were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about 7 days. By faith the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, when she had received the spies with peace. What shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, of Barak, of Samson, of Jephthah, of David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Do you see the common denominator in all of these? Their faith did what? It moved them to do something. Okay? What is faith? Faith is not belief or even conviction. Not entirely. okay? Faith has those aspects of faith, of belief and conviction, okay? But while those are part of faith, they are not faith until they inspire action. Morgan writes, this is not faith, speaking of belief and conviction. This is not faith until it produces in the will of man who believes it true an answer that harmonizes with this claim. Okay, what does he mean? Well, do you believe in God? If you believe in God, good. Do you have convictions? If you have convictions, good. Okay? But is there activity in your life that harmonizes with those beliefs and with those convictions? If not, you don't have faith. You don't. Right. It's because if our belief and our convictions don't have action that harmonizes with them, you don't have faith. Because faith moves us to act. Faith moves us to do something. Okay? So when we say that they had a failure of faith, what are we saying? They had a failure of obedience, a failure to act. Now, if you say, well, what should my belief and what should my convictions make me do? What should they inspire me to do? Should I walk on my knees from Spain to Jerusalem in a pilgrimage, as people endeavored to do around the time of the Crusades? What should I do? Number one, first and foremost, they should inspire you to obey God. Because God calls on us to do, to act. Okay, we saw that in chapter 10, the first verses I read. Okay, chapter 10, verse 24. And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works. What should we do? What should our faith inspire us to do? Number one, they should inspire in us the desire to love one another and to good works. And they should inspire us to help each other to love and good works. What then? Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. What should belief and conviction inspire you to do? What should faith, what is the response of faith? What is obedience? To gather together. To exhort each other to be like Christ. To help each other. We are the family. We are a family. We are brothers and sisters in Christ. And we have to help each other and push each other and elevate each other to be more like Christ. Not beat each other over the head and say, you need to be better. No, elevate. Say, you're doing an awesome job. You're doing great. You know, you inspire me. You know, you help me. You know, I struggle with some things, but you don't struggle on them. And I want you to help me to not struggle on these things. And maybe there's things that you struggle with that I don't struggle with, and I want to help you. It's this elevating. It's this helping each other and bringing each other up. Okay? This remnant was in a panic to find safety, while a safe haven was waiting, if only they would obey. If only they would obey. What comes with the failure of faith? Morgan lists two things. First, degeneration of desire. What did these people desire? They desired peace and bread. And they would pay for that peace at any cost other than war and hunger. You say, well, that's what they were running from. Exactly. They were running from war and hunger, but God called them to stay and to trust that if they obeyed God, they wouldn't face war and hunger. Because war and hunger followed them when they went down into Egypt. Okay? They would stoop to slavery again if it meant peace. This is where their corruption of conscience came in. Their failure of faith first led to a degeneration of desire where they wanted things that God did not have planned for them. And really, well, actually, they wanted things that God wanted for them, but they wanted it in a wrong way. And so they went after those, and they failed because they didn't obey God. Jeremiah is calling on them not to allow themselves to have a failure of faith, but to have a victory of faith, a victory of obedience, to act out on their faith. You have belief, okay. You have convictions, okay. But do they motivate you to act, to do something? And Jeremiah is telling them, or what Jeremiah is trying to convince them of, to motivate them to, is to obey God. Just obey. So if there's nothing in your life that no actions, no activity that harmonizes with your belief and your convictions, then you don't have faith. You have a failure of faith. Let's close in prayer.